Hey there, YouTube. It's Petey Two Finger, and I ran across an interesting question. Um, should we look at some pictures? Let's shut this off here. I got some pictures. Oh, there's Mr. Chicky Bobito. He's licking his chops. Just had some treats. Yeah, look at this guitar. And there's the case. I thought that was pretty good. So this dude says, I've been going crazy building dirt circuits lately, from transparent overdrive to sputtery fuzz. And so often my favorite ones are incredibly noisy. The Distortion, Carcosa, fender bender, etc. Is there any general tips to significantly decrease noise in a circuit, other than boxing it and simple things that tend to not really decrease it all that much? Thanks for your help. He's surprised anyone buys these pedals. They're so noisy. So we're going to talk about tricks that you can implement. Now, first off, I have to say, a buffer. In my experience, a lot of these gain boxes, distortions that you build will have all kinds of horrific noise. That's all solved if you run a buffer in front of it. Now, when adding a buffer to certain circuits is not going to be good. If it's like a fuzz, certain circuits, the buffer won't agree with it. So what I recommend doing is this. Typically when we build a pedal, we'll finish building and we'll go and test that pedal out, meaning one pedal, the pedal you built. Now on a pedal board, you're going to have a buffer, and that solves all these noise issues. So one of the things that you should really do is grab a Boss or Digitech, whatever non-true bypass buffered pedal you may own, and when you're testing these pedals, try putting the buffered pedal before it and see, does this eliminate all this horrible noise and feedback and squelching and screeching and popping? Then you know, okay, don't ever run this pedal unless there's a buffer in front of it. Now, if it's going to be a situation where that might be the case, then you could consider building a buffer circuit on what's called a daughter board or a separate little circuit and installing that inside the pedal. Ideally, and ideally it would be on the same circuit board. So if it's a Vero layout and you're cool with building it twice, you could easily kind of stitch that together with some like Irfan View image editing software. Take the image of the JFET buffer and tag it on into image, extend the image and tag that buffer on there. There's something called the Tillman buffer, which uses a single JFET. So that's a three-legged transistor. And let's take a look at the Tillman buffer. We could look at some buffers here real quick. That Samurai guy, that's where I found that picture of the OJ guitar. It was 7 ugly guitars, or the worst. So I do need to give credit. Truly horrific guitars. This is an old video, but nonetheless, I had never seen the O.J. Simpson. So Tillman buffer is, now they call this a discrete FET preamp, but it will do the job. Runs off a 9-volt battery, very high input impedance, medium output impedance, 3 dB of gain, low noise, graceful overload. It sounds really good. This is a great circuit. So it's a single N-channel JFET, J201, or you could use, there's notes about using different FETs. But yeah, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 resistors and 2 capacitors. So like I said, when I say, oh, you could just tack this onto a circuit, literally you could. And it's not that big of a deal. There's all this information on it here. The only issue would be those J201s and JFET daughter board. You buy SMT JFETs, which are these tiny little guys, and three-legged guys, and you solder these. Here they are. I get mine from Delyk PCB, DELYK. Delyk PCB had the best prices. They were like 50 cents or 60 cents. And utility boards. $0.65 for a pack of 4. Great deal. So as you can see here, we'll go back. No offense to Delyk. This is his image. I'm such a goof. So yeah, this SMT JFET is a little black guy here, rectangle, and it's got 3 legs. So basically, I will put this board down, which this is about the size of a pencil here, pencil eraser. And I will put a little paste flux on this, and I will use a fresh soldering iron tip and put a little dot of solder on each pad. And then use a pin to hold the JFET down with one hand, put the JFET, move it around with the pen, get it lined up, and then you can come in and just reheat each pad and it'll drop down. Boom, boom, boom. Or you can just hold it on there and come in and carry the solder on your tip over. That's actually easier way to do it than the bunk, bunk, bunk version. That's the only thing. Once you have this built, and you buy these in bulk, because if you go to eBay and buy through-hole JFETs, you will be getting fakes. So we go J201 and fake, 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 fake. They're all fakes. You don't want to deal with that. Just go ahead and get these, and there are these pin adapters. This is getting really complicated. Why don't we take a look at a different type of buffer? So buffer Vero layout. There is a clon buffer. The clon buffer uses a chip. So here's a 2N5457. You can get through-hole 2N5457s. So this would be one where you wouldn't have to play around with that daughter board. Same with this. Then here is the TLO71 clon buffer. You see it's 3 resistors, 2 capacitors, and the chip. And it's not a big deal. So running buffers in front of and again, like the real way that people do this, Boss pedal or Digitech pedal, any pedal that's not true bypass or doesn't have that silver click-click switch. Those silver click-click switches always mean true bypass, usually, 99% of the time. The other pedals will be buffered bypass. So if you have one buffered bypass pedal or a tuner that's buffered, you put that first and you're good. That should be enough buffering for the whole pedal board to solve all those noise issues. A lot of people will run the tuner and then a delay or some fancy thing at the end of the signal chain that has a buffer. So you have one buffer for your input cable and your board, and then another buffer for the cable that goes to the amp, and it's going to raise up the signal and make sure everything's crisp and clean even if you're bypassed. See, all those connections and switches that you run when you set up a pedal board, they cut down your signal and they remove your tone, your treble. So these little buffer amps compensate for that. And when it comes to noise issues with pedals, I gotta tell you, the first thing you should try if you've built some dirt box is just do a test with a buffered pedal and it might solve it for you. Now the second thing, is it boxed up? You know, did you build this thing? Is it a breadboard? Is it just a circuit that's laying out in the open? Having it in a grounded chassis is going to help a lot. But there's another trick we can do, and this works with high gain fuzzes, distortions, anything where it's a real lot of dirt or gain. What you do, we're going to say this is our input jack and this is our PCB or switching PCB or wherever the wiring for your input jack goes to. So let's say it's the switching PCB. From the switching PCB, there's wires that go to the main circuit board of the effect, but we're not going to mess with that. So you've built this pedal and it's making noise. You try to buffer, it's still got RFI. Here's your input jack. Here's the switching board. There's one wire here, which is the ground, minus. And there's a wire here, which is the plus. You're not going to mess with the ground wire. You're going to leave that be. You're going to unsolder and completely remove the positive wire. And what you're going to do is get a shielded wire. So this is where there's a center conductor and then there's shielding all the way around, nice shielding, okay? What you do, you prep that wire in a way that the center conductor or stinger, the positive or the hot line, isn't really exposed a real lot. Like, you don't want to cut it way back and only have a little bit of shielding and have a bunch of positive hanging out. The idea is to really protect that input wire, because see, what you've done, you've created an antenna. When you have a high gain device, an amplifier, which a distortion box is, it's gaining up 200, 400x, whatever it is, and then you just run a line off the input. Anything in the air that comes on there is going to go on that line and then go and get amplified and come out your speaker. And that's what you're hearing, your noise problem. So we unsolder both ends of our positive connector and throw that in the trash. Then we prepare a cable where you're going to solder the positive center conductor of this shielded cable in place. And then what you do, you should have two pigtails of the shielding coming down to solder, to connect up. Cut the second one off. Where the shielding side on the opposite end of the jack. So there's two pigtails. There's the shielding comes down. You've twisted it into a pigtail and tinned it. You take the side on the jack side, and solder that onto the ground connection. Go ahead and hook up the shielding to the ground on the input jack. But the other side, the switching PCB, you cut it off. Do not connect that. So then what that does is any of the hash that gets attracted to this antenna, it's going to go in to try to get in there on your signal, but it's going to hit that shielding and it's going to carry it right to ground. Now, if you tie that other ground in, somehow some capacitance effect in between those shielding and that wire, whatever it is, because there's so much gain, it'll leak into the circuit. But if you only connect one side of that shielding, and I know this sounds crazy, this guy named Robert Henry has a company selling PCBs, Dead Astronaut. He built a pedal called a Spitfire. I had JFETs that were the wrong pinout, and I had them in there backwards, and it was making all kinds of racket. And that was one of the things when I was working with him when I was new at pedal building. He suggested this and explained it to me. So that was my answer on the forum was, you should try a buffered pedal first. The second answer being there's a trick with a shielded input wire. And you only need to do it on the input. You would think If you're me, you think it wouldn't be good enough just running it to the switching PCB. If there's a line, that same line through going from the switching PCB to the main board, you would need to do that too. You don't. It's electronics, doesn't make sense. But does it? Does it? This is why people act like this stuff is a black art. So that's my tip for you. Keep in mind, it's not going to be a magic bullet, but when you're in the position of your guitar player you met at the open mic, it's going to pay you $150 to make him a big muff, and you've made this thing and it's a squeal box. It's just oscillating when you turn the gain up past 3 o'clock. It starts squealing. First, try a buffer before you poop your pants and start tacking snubber caps from Q2 from bass to ground or netter, all that, tack in some resistors on the back of the circuit board. Anywhere that there's parts, just start putting resistors on there and capacitors to ground. Snubber. Yeah, that's what you need to do. Don't do that. Try a buffer. Then try shielded wire. All right, you guys, I hope that was helpful. Again, I'm not a pro, I'm not a tech, I'm an expert. This is stuff that other people taught me from me asking and being a pest. Is this helpful? Probably not. Is it interesting? Probably not. Sorry. Anyway, try to stay cool. Hug your pet. If you have a cat or a dog that you're able to show them some physical affection, a little huggy, hug. Like I've got this brushy. This works too. And then there's always the, you fix my handle. There's always the standby Temptations brand treats. And peace.